Many experts now agree that Russia is on a long march to war, and the evidence is everywhere. The Kremlin has recently revamped Soviet-era civil defense plans. It has upgraded bomb shelters in major cities, and it has orchestrated emergency drills for civilians and military personnel to prepare for nuclear attacks by none other than the United States. The Rand Corporation warns that in the event of a conflict, Russia could defeat NATO forces in the Baltic countries within 60 hours. Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Vitaly Churkin, says tensions between the U.S. and Russia are the worst since 1973. And the Financial Times reports that, quote, Russia is putting the nuclear gun back on the table by abandoning a series of nuclear agreements with the West. All this raises urgent questions for investors and non-investors alike. Is war with Russia truly likely? Can Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin make a deal that prevents a massive arms race or worse? What will be the impact on gold, bonds, interest rates, stocks, and the U.S. dollar? I'm Martin Weiss, and in this special three-part video series, I give you some well-researched answers. But first, a quick review of the history. It's February 9, 1990. The Berlin Wall has fallen, and the Soviet state is on the brink of a massive decline. U.S. Secretary of State James Baker is in Moscow. He wants Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to support the reunification of Germany, and in exchange, he makes some promises. He gives Gorbachev, quote, ironclad guarantees that NATO will not expand 1 inch eastward. But Baker puts nothing in writing, and neither NATO nor the U.S. signs a treaty of that kind. Years go by, and we fast forward to the mid-1990s. Soviet Union has collapsed. Russia's economy is in shambles. Its military in disarray. Its influence over East European nations virtually non-existent. Those countries see nothing to gain from a continuing military alliance with a fallen empire. They naturally gravitate to NATO. March 12, 1999. NATO does precisely what Secretary of State Baker promised it would never do. It adds a long line of former Soviet bloc countries. First, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland, 3 countries still far from the Russian border. Then, 5 years later, a new batch, including Bulgaria and Romania, plus the 3 Baltic states, Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, right on Russia's border. Kiev, early 2014. The Ukrainian Revolution burst onto the global scene with unpredicted fury. It culminates in the fall of the pro-Russian Ukrainian government and the rise of a pro-Western regime. For Russia's Vladimir Putin, it's the last straw. Within days, Putin moves on the Crimean Peninsula. He sends unidentified Russian men in military uniform to take control of Crimea's 2 main airports, and soon they take the entire peninsula, with the Russian Federation promptly moving to annex the territory. It is the first time since World War II that a major world power invades and captures the territory of another nation, and this single act threatens to dismantle the world order that has prevailed for 70 years. The West responds with 3 rounds of sanctions against Russia, and Russia retaliates with a total ban on food imports from the United States and other countries. Syria, September 2015. Russia jumps into the civil war, starting with airstrikes against rebel forces, soon expanding to a massive buildup of military bases, and then the bombing of entire cities in Syria. Moscow, October 2016. Putin suspends a landmark agreement with the United States to dispose of surplus weapons-grade plutonium. And he announces a plan to re-establish military bases in Vietnam and Cuba. The U.S. hits back with formal accusations of war crimes in Syria and of malicious meddling in the U.S. presidential elections. November 2016. Trump beats Clinton in the upset victory of the century. But in the Russian parliament, lawmakers break out into loud applause as champagne is poured. Meanwhile, Russia cancels 3 nuclear deals with the United States and moves nuclear-capable missiles into Kaliningrad, a small Russian enclave on the border with Lithuania. But I must say, this story is just beginning. And as I'll explain in part 2 of this special video series, the most frightening prospect of all is the declared readiness and willingness by both sides to use a special kind of weapon with potentially disastrous consequences.